Ladies and gentlemen, today on the program, the great and powerful Lynne Hanson, singer-songwriter, Canada's Queen of Americana. I've spent most of my morning now trying to get a good intro together for this episode. I'm failing mightily, but also trying heroically. I was going to say a lot more things, but I find that the harder I try at this, the more I try to say things, the worse it gets. So I'm not going to do that. What I am going to do is a couple of shout-outs. First, to my good friend Alexandra Liebert of Fürth, Germany, which I still don't think I'm saying properly, but I'm trying my best. Alexandra recommended Lynne to me when I put out a call for recommendations a while back, and I appreciate her recommendation. Now, I knew of Lynne. We have mutual friends in the music business. In fact, I've played with people who have played with Lynne. But I've never actually talked to Lynne before, so this was my first opportunity. And thank you, Germany, for doing that. Isn't it weird how music connects us all around the world? Thank you, Lexi. I also want to give a shout out to Shelley House and Jeff Dewsbury for purchasing t-shirts. I very much appreciate their support. They are both old and dear friends of mine. Thank you to both of them. If you're a t-shirt person, I still have some left. The initial run of John Huff Podcast t-shirts created by the great Denny Gauthier. They are wonderful and they make great Christmas presents, kids. So you can go to my website, john-huff.com, and you can purchase them there from my store. You can also read my tour blogs, my other blogs. You can see music videos. You can hear music I've played on. Why, it's a day's entertainment, kids, if you just go there and check it out. Now, at the end of every episode, I say, if you're an Apple Podcast person, please do me a big favor and leave a rating and review of the show, preferably a positive one. And I'm going to say that at the end of this episode too, but if leaving reviews is not your thing, but you still want to support the show, one of the things you can do is share these episodes. So if you go to Facebook, the John Huff Podcast, I always plug the show there. You can share the episodes from that space. You can share the episodes on Instagram. You can retweet whatever it is I tweet about the show. And all of that helps me immensely. Whatever it takes, whatever I can do, whatever we can all do to spread the show a little further, I very much appreciate. So thank you in advance for doing that. Thanks to others who have done that before. It helps me a lot, okay? Now, I'm not going to say anything else. Why? Because I've been talking all morning and it's been gibberish. And I don't want to go down gibberish road again here. So the last thing I'm going to say, maybe the most important thing before we get to my conversation with the wonderful and talented Lynne Hanson, is hey, Denny boy. Roll intro. Hello, you're listening to the John Huff Podcast. Oh, yay. Lynne Hanson, hello.
Hey, John, how are you doing?
Canada's Queen of Americana, according to Jan Hall.
That's a great title.
You like that?
I love it. I love it.
Jan is one of several mutual friends that we have.
It's a small community, you know, when you start looking around.
It is. It really is. It's funny how people are connected. I've played in several acts with Steve Clark, our mutual friend, the bass player.
Oh, yeah. I was just texting with him. That's so funny.
Were you really?
I really was.
Yeah, it's so fun. It's great. So how are you today?
Oh, not too bad. Not too bad.
How's Ottawa? Are you in Ottawa?
I'm actually in Ottawa. It's like such a rare occurrence for me to be home. I'm home for a couple of weeks still, so this is awesome.
Yeah.
Trying to catch up on a million things.
I bet. Ottawa is the coldest place I've ever been.
It's pretty cold out there right now, but I'm just not going outside. Like I've decided that I don't have to go anywhere today, so I'm not going to.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Did you grow up in Ottawa?
I did. Yeah, I did. It's been my hometown for ever. And I spent 1 year in Toronto, and that was it. Otherwise, I've always lived here.
Oh, when did you live in Toronto?
Oh, back ages ago. It was I don't even know if it was a full year. Probably, I don't even remember when. It'd be like 15 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How could you leave? How could you leave the big smoke?
It's expensive. And,
Yes.
the thing with Ottawa is it has a great live music scene and it has an international airport. So really,
That's true.
I get, and I can always go everywhere else that I need to be. I mean, the one thing I wish, or that I do miss about Toronto is that's that idea that you can go down and just be participating in something like every night of the week, and there's such great players and you don't have to go looking for them. Whereas it can be a little tougher here because people do tour quite a bit and you have to get out of Ottawa, because there's not a ton of session work. There's not a ton of different things. So it can be tough just in terms of, if you want to spend a lot of time here in Ottawa, but it's a great home base because again, it's not hugely expensive.
London is very much the same. I'm in London.
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew that or not, but
I do now.
yeah. So it's very much the same here in that we're somewhat lucky because Toronto is proximal. It's only a couple of hours. But so expensive there. And so London's also a great home base, but yes, you have to get out of it. You can't really make a career here. You can have a home base, but you got to go elsewhere to play, right?
Yeah.
So I totally get it. I love Ottawa. I think it's a great city. It's just too cold.
Yeah.
It's just too cold. But I've been there in February and it was a nightmare. So you probably like get out. Like I'm going on the road.
I try really hard and I try to go to places that are warmer.
Yes. Which is almost everywhere. Right?
Except for I'm going to Banff in January and Winnipeg in January. So I don't know. I'm kind of stupid that way.
Banff I can see because Banff is so magnificently beautiful.
Yes.
People don't say that about Winnipeg so much.
No. But you know what? They have a great roots scene. Like they really do. They have a great music scene. So there's reasons to go for sure.
Yeah, there's reasons to go everywhere, but this country is so cold. Anyways. I'm sure the audience loves us yammering about Canadian cities. You grew up in Ottawa. Did you grow up in a musical kind of family?
No, not at all. I'm like the only musician in my family. My grandfather was apparently a fantastic harmonica player, so he was really musical, but I don't remember him because he died when I was 2. And my other grandfather, he was apparently a bit of a poet, but again, died before I was born, so never met him. I have read some of his poems though, and I think that's kind of cool. So I feel like maybe the creative thing skipped a generation and just landed on me.
How did you come then to playing music? Were you into music as a kid?
I loved music as a kid. I'm the youngest of 8 kids, and I have older brothers and sisters, and they had to babysit me because, there was so many kids. So my mom just would hand me off to these people. And the best way to calm me down was to just literally sit me in front of music for hours and hours, and I would listen to their songs, their music. And then we had this cheap organ, this terrible cheap organ, and it used to sit in the corner and nobody played it except me. And I would sit there for hours and hours and just sing along and play along to these songs that I had been learning. And so when I was about 14, my brother had an acoustic guitar and he never played it. And so I just took it and started learning these songs. And that was kind of the beginning of the end. That was kind of the beginning for me. And I always loved writing.
Really?
I've been a voracious reader since I was old enough to read, and I read everything I could get my hands on. So I've always loved words, and putting the two things together just seemed to be something that came pretty natural to me.
What sort of music were you listening to as a kid that came from your siblings?
It was a lot of sort of the classic sort of singer-songwriter stuff,
really?
Springsteen and stuff like that. And yeah, so I think I got exposed to stuff early on that really made me value the lyric, the importance of lyrics. And so, I didn't listen to a lot of pop when I was growing up because I was listening to these singer-songwriters instead. And it just had a huge influence on me, I think.
Yeah. Did you start writing songs right away?
Not hugely. Like I tried doing it when I was a teenager, and I would be rough like anybody else. And then I didn't really play for a while, and I kind of fell into it backwards. I was in a relationship with a guitar player, and he decided he was going to put out a couple of records. So I played with him and I sang with him, and then we broke up. So I started writing songs, and then I got a lot of encouragement from a guitar player who I did some co-writing with, and he was such a good guitar player. Yeah. And he really made me feel like I could do this thing. So I made a record, and some people in Europe really liked it, and I started touring and stuff. And man, it's like, it's not by choice, it's just like, it seemed to really be a calling for me. And I even feel to this day, like every time I have that feeling like, oh man, I got to give this up. Like I just, this is a stupid way to try to make a living. Somebody always pulls me back in and things, move forward. And I just kind of feel like, well, on the day that people stop wanting to listen to my songs, that's when I'll stop trying to perform them out live. But I don't think I'll ever be able to stop writing because it's just the thing that gives me the most joy in the entire world.
Is there another side to that? Because I'm a writer as well. And yeah, it's true. Nothing makes me feel better necessarily, but also nothing makes me feel worse. Have you had that experience where it's just like not happening and it's an awful feeling?
Well, I mean, there's always writer's block, and there's always that fear that you will never again write something of significance or that's worth listening to or worth reading. But I think I'm at this point in my career, because I've had such a creative output, like I now have a belief that as long as I put myself, at the mercy of the muse, that it's a relationship that we have together, and it's not going to end. But I think the thing that gets in the way sometimes is expectation, right? Or this feeling that you're going to do something with this, and this is what I'm going to accomplish. And that's when you have that sense of discord or the unease, because you're not being true to your art. There's art, and then there's the music business, and those two things should never get in the same room together.
That's a very, very hard thing to separate, though.
It really is. It really is. And I actually found myself, for instance, today, I have moved rooms just because, I've been working at the dining room table, and I'm in a bit of a funk. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to move rooms, and I'm going to change my scenery, and that should just clear the air between me and art. And I'm going to get back to doing some art today, and then I'll worry about the business tomorrow.
Yeah. So by art, you mean writing more songs?
Just writing more songs, or just playing music, like just working on songs that I've been working on, or like making sure that I'm nailing them. And I wrote a poem this morning, like just that kind of thing, so that you just get back to the point of remember what I am first and foremost, and that is creator. I do the other things, but the first thing I am is a creator.
Have you always had that kind of faith?
I think the thing is, it's the first thing I think of in the morning, and it's the last thing I think of at night.
Really?
And so I'm definitely a performer. I love performing. I think I'm pretty good at it. But I think my relationship has always been about that 15 seconds when a song is done. That feeling of wonder that says like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. And it's that feeling that I'm always chasing after. And I think that can be pure regardless of the industry. It can be pure regardless of everything that's going on around you, because that's the gift we've been given as songwriters, is that we have access to that. And that I think that's probably the greatest thing that I've ever, has been bestowed upon me. And I have gratitude every day for that gift.
That's great. That's really, really important. I think it's so easy to get caught up in whether something is successful, or whether it's working, or whether it's going anywhere. And I mean, you talked already about there are times when you think this is a stupid way to make a living. It's like being able to balance that is really important. And I struggle with that a lot. Now I'm a drummer and I'm a side player, and that's an up and down kind of life, you know? It's good to be reminded. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I'm getting ready to put a new record out.
Yes, you are.
You know, it's terrifying because the world really has changed in terms of, you know, how people value the commodity that is music. Right. Because, you know, it used to be that there was a return on what you were doing out there. And now it's harder and harder to find. And you're so reliant now on making those connections with people. And I think I'm lucky because the kind of messages and the kind of music that I create allows people to connect and see themselves in my songs. But it's tough. And like, do I have crisis of faith on a daily basis, sometimes hourly, you know, sometimes like second by second. So it's, you know, it's especially the closer I get to, you know, actually launching this record, the more I doubt what I've done and I doubt my own ability. And I have the same doubts as anybody has in any element of their own life. I think sometimes that as someone who has their own business could probably relate to, you're not working for someone else. So the downs feel so far down and the highs are that much more rewarding. So, I think when people say like, oh, it's just such a great thing that you get to be an artist and it's such a beautiful life. I think anybody who owns their own business probably feels the same sense of purpose. But it's like you bleed it when it doesn't go well. And it's, you know, that's kind of the music business.
It is.
It's very up and down.
So much. And, I mean, are you technically an indie artist at this point? Or are you with a label right now?
I would technically be an indie artist. I don't have a record label, and you know, there's just not a lot of that kind of support out there for the kind of music that I do to begin with. And I think you know, the way the economics have gone, it makes it that much tougher for these kind of roots Americana type indie labels to get behind artists. So a lot of the times now, you know, you do find most people are kind of building their own and hoping that it will come.
But most of the artists I play with, in fact, all of them are in the same boat. And that's okay. That's actually kind of an advantageous place to be in some ways. You know, it's a weird time for music, but it's also a kind of a neat time of opportunity if you have the courage, you know, to try.
No, I think it's true. And I think if you have the business skills, you know, you can control every element of your own career. I mean, you do need help. You do need a team. And that means sometimes hiring a team because you can't do everything yourself. And I'm very lucky. I have some PR people that are really good and they're working the album for me. And again, like if you know, you're seeing more and more artists are just their own record label. The good thing is that you make all the decisions. The bad thing is you have to make all the decisions.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, you know, the money is your money.
Yeah.
Whether it comes or goes, it's on you, but it's possible, which is great. And I'm seeing that with my own eyes with some of the people I'm playing with. So that's super. It just takes a bit of brass. That's all. It takes some courage.
It does. And I think you sort of have to go all in and all out. And I think, you know, that's certainly the approach I'm taking with this new record is we're looking at a bunch of different markets and, you know, it's nothing's being done halfway. Cause I think with this record, like I'm really happy with, what Jim Bryson did in terms of the production. I think there's some fantastic musicians that came on board to make this album. And I'm pretty pleased just, you know, in that kind of cross your fingers, please don't have negative reviews, but I'm really happy with the songs, probably more so than I have been at any other point. And so I think if I were ever going to go it alone in terms of like, let's see if we can build this thing and make it go, this is probably the album I'd want to stake my future on, which I kind of have.
I hear you.
If this doesn't work out, man.
Of course it will.
I'm going to have to sell a kidney.
There's a really hot market for kidneys.
Well, I have 2 of them. That's what I figured, you know?
Right. So you're good. And, you know, kidneys regenerate, do they not? So if you even sell like a piece of one?
I think it's the liver that regenerates. But I don't drink anymore, so my liver's probably in pretty good shape.
That's good. That's right, because it regenerates, right?
Yeah.
I was planning to ask you about all of that at some point during this interview, and I don't know if it's now or not. Do you want to talk about the new record? It's called Just Words.
Yeah, absolutely.
And tell me about this album of yours.
Well, it's a bit of a departure for me, especially production-wise. And I've known Jim on the periphery for a long time. We've never worked together before this album, but I knew where he came from, and I felt like for this record, I really wanted to have some experiment with sound, like not just make another record that sounds like Americana, but actually try and come up with something that was going to go in a different place. And I thought, even just in terms of the songs themselves, like I've become a different writer. It's not just another heartbreak record. There's sad songs on the record for sure, but it's not all about heartbreak this time. And so I felt like as a creator, I had matured into a different direction. And so I really wanted a different sound as well. And Jim I swear to God, he knows every song that's ever been made. and so he's so knowledgeable about where you can go with sound, and he doesn't like overpower a track. So it's this beautiful combination of just enough. So there's these things, that are added in that you just like, you might not even notice as an audience or a listener, but if you took them away, there would be something missing.
Really?
And then to have a guy like Kevin Bright playing guitar on this record, I mean, he's so good. It was almost worth it just to watch him in studio, to see him create, because he's brilliant. So I feel like, all the right pieces were in place to give the songs, my tiny little songs, the best opportunity to get all dressed up and, go to the prom and look pretty hot.
That's great. I know of Jim Bryson via his connection to the Weaker Thans.
Yes.
Which are one of my favorite bands. And their drummer, Jason Tate, was actually episode number 4 of this podcast, which was a highlight for me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I got to spend an hour with Jason when he was in town with Bahamas, which is super. And it's cool. I mean, not everybody can give up their songs for input from other people like that, right? Mm-hmm. That's probably a maturity thing. But it tends to, other people can open things up in a way that you had never saw coming, right?
They really can. And even what Jim did with some of the grooves, like I have a sort of a set groove, and there's some things that it's like, I have to play the guitar on this because it's just not a groove that he grooves to. But there was other stuff where he's like, you know what? Do you mind if I play a guitar? Do you mind if I play electric guitar on this instead of you? Because I feel it like this. And then I gave it over to him, and let him discover maybe the real nature of the song, because I think the biggest thing that you can do as a writer is be limited by your own tool set. And if my tool set is limited to sort of a swampy type groove on this kind of song, or like a finger picky kind of folky approach on this song, that's all it's ever going to be. But if you can give over to somebody who has a different idea and let them take it in a different direction and see if you like it, it's amazing what came out of it. And I think that's kind of the cool thing about, when you take an artist like myself and you put me in the same room with somebody like Jim, who is so different, you really do get the sum of 2 parts equals 3. It's like, it's really the best of all the worlds, because to me, at least, it became something it never would have been had I been producing my own record or working with another, like a more typical Americana type producer.
Right. What sorts of sounds came into this? Were there different instruments than you're accustomed to, or just tones, or what?
Well, tones and like Jim is an amazing keyboard player, piano, keyboard, and he's got his finger on the pulse of so many different kinds of layering and sounds. And so it's like different parts coming in and being layered on top of one another, that just brings something really special to a song. It's very similar to what Kevin Bright can do, because, he'll be playing in the studio and he's got 2 or 3 parts that he's creating at the same time. and he hears them in his head, and then you hear them together, and you're like, wow, that the lyrics are the same, the melody's the same, but man, did you ever bring my song to a different level? And I think it's a slickness of production without being slick is probably the best way I can describe it.
Yeah, that's cool. Will you be able to reproduce that live?
I think there's elements that will be reproduced live, but you know, a live performance is so different than studio, and they're two different animals. And I think especially when a singer-songwriter tries to replicate the studio sound, it's almost like you're doing a disservice to the song, because live, when I present a song live, there's the story that comes before it, and then there's my presentation of it and my delivery of it, and how the audience will experience that in real time. And it's like those two things are almost two very separate things. Right. And I think as soon as you decide, like, I'm not going to try to replicate this, I'm going to deliver it in real time. Because a recording is a moment in time, and a live performance is something that somebody experiences in real time. And I see them as very different things. Yeah,
okay. I can see that too. I've often wondered to myself, what's the real song? The one on the record or the one that I'm seeing performed? You know what I mean? Like, to me, they can be very different things, and I wonder which one is the real one.
Well, you know, what's funny is I think my personal belief on that is the real song was when I created it alone, me with one instrument. And that's the base upon which every other thing is built. And if you have a good song, then I can strip it right back down to being a solo song. And you as the listener won't sit there and think like, oh, wow, that's not a very good song, or well, I didn't really relate to that. I think singer-songwriters write songs, and then the foundation is the experience, and everything that's built on top of it is just, it's bling. You know, I see it as bling. It's just bling. I mean, I love it.
Yeah. I've heard that said that a really good song should be able to be played solo acoustic, and it'll still be a really good song.
And, you know, I was down in Kerrville in Texas, and I was at the Kerrville Folk Festival, and that's where it's all about the song. And you're not even able, like when you do these in the rounds, you do these song swaps, you don't even get to intro the song. Like part of the etiquette is that you just play it. You say the title and you play it. And so the belief there is that if it's a really good song, you play it. Not only do you just play it acoustically and sing it out loud, you don't even get to tell me what it's about, because I'm going to react to it just on its own. And I love that experience, because to be honest, I think that's how I want my songs judged as well. It's like, can it sit on its own? And then when you hear it all fully produced, again, it's just like, man, that is one gorgeous, you know, car. Let's call it a car. And we like all the bells and whistles because it's sweet. But man, just the lines on that car alone are just, you know, it's like a 57 Corvette or something. I don't know. Give me a good car. I don't know cars.
Did they make Corvettes in 57?
I'm probably not. All the car guys are going to say I'm an idiot.
I'm not a car guy, so I can't argue with you, but I get what you're saying. That's cool. Was it intimidating to sit in a Texas songwriter circle and do that?
Oh, you're darn right. It's intimidating.
Yeah.
But you know what was really cool, though, is that when someone comes back and quotes a single line out of a song that you've written and they've heard it one time, that is probably the biggest compliment you're ever going to get as a songwriter, is that somebody actually remembered a line having only heard it once.
Yeah.
And they quote it, you know, it's like, wow, that's cool.
That's a Texas thing, it being about the song. I got to play in Texas for the first time earlier this year. And we hung out with a lot of Texas musicians, and it seems like that's a Texas thing.
Well, I think it certainly is something that you see a lot of in Texas. I think you know, when you're in Nashville and you're with songwriters, you see the same thing. Like there's certainly the commercial side of Nashville, but what people don't understand is there's an awful lot of really great writers who are there who love songs, and I think anytime you have a critical mass of songwriters, really good songwriters, you see the magic that actually happens with a song. Like what can happen with just lyrics and a melody, you know, and a chord progression, and how it really is. You can't polish a bad song. You know, And you can't even really ruin a great song with bad production. You kind of can, but ultimately in there you can still hear that there's a great song. But a not great song, no matter how much you polish it, it could be slick, it could be, it could be tap your feet to it, but it's entertainment, it's not art.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the world needs both things, and one is not better than the other, but we should never get confused by the two things because they are very different animals.
Oh, that's interesting. Have you spent a lot of time in Nashville?
I've been down a couple of times, and I've done a couple of trips down to Nashville, and I have it on my to-do list because there's a bunch of people I want to write with, and I just have to find some time to get back down there again. I love being in Nashville just because there is a sort of energy again. I think when you have all these creative people in this one place in a small little area, it's kind of a magical place. Just in terms of like it's the frequency that you put your finger on in order to create. It's definitely louder there as far as that creativity is concerned.
Interesting. I've never been. I was able to play in Memphis earlier this year.
Oh yeah.
And Memphis has its own thing, but Nashville I've not had the pleasure. Nashville scares me a little. I feel like you really gotta have your confidence together if you're gonna go there. You know what I mean?
I think you do. I actually think you're right, especially as a player. Like, I mean, some of the songwriters and some of the players there are just out of this world because that's where the best people go. There, New York, LA, places like Austin. But I find it's kind of like, if you think you got game, you should probably go and see if you do. Get on the court with the people who are the best and see how it works out and see, how good are you? Because I think there is something to that, and I don't mean like good, bad. I just mean like, can you hold your own? Like, you, if you're really a writer, can you write with some of these people and hold your own? Because I always want to be around the best. They all, I can't remember who it was who said it, but there was a songwriter early on in the 50s or something that said, you want to play with people that are better than you because it'll bring you up. And you always want to be around people that are better than you.
Yeah. I have no trouble finding people who are better than me.
Me neither.
Yeah. So the record is called Just Words. Tell me about that title and what it means to you.
Well, the title track, the title track is about how words are more impactful, I think, sometimes than we think they are. So that when we are unkind with words, when we use words harshly, we can cause an awful lot of damage. And sometimes it's easier to get over a bloody nose than it is to have to repair the damage that a really harsh sentence can deliver, the damage it can deliver. And so I think I had a couple incidents, where people were pretty unkind with words to me. And then I talked to a few people about that kind of thing as well. And I just thought, I got to say something about this. And so I ended up calling the record itself Just Words because, first of all, I thought it was an important topic. It's something that we need to bring out there because the world really does need more kindness. We need more tolerance. We need more understanding of each other. But then also for me as a writer, the lyrics are really important. And I just wanted to call attention to that. So it's almost an ironic thing. It's just words, but it's not,
Yeah. I've read interviews with you where you talked about learning to write truth.
Yes.
Tell me about writing truth.
Well, it's tough to be vulnerable with your lyrics. It's tough to be vulnerable with song, because you are putting it out there in the public forum. And, the number of people who have said to me, if these lyrics are even halfway autobiographical, I hope you're doing better. But I think it is really hard to say what you think, like to say how you feel. But also to try and deliver it in a way that other people can connect to. And so other people can see themselves in your story. So it's not just some personal, here's like me onto the page. It's about me sharing something that I think it's common to all of us. Like we have all had somebody say something unkind to us, that maybe was uncalled for. And that caused us to go into our room maybe and get into the fetal position for a couple of days.
Yeah.
It's sometimes the world hurts sometimes. And a song like Higher Ground, where, I'm trying to tell people, like, basically, try to see the other perspective, try to see it from someone else's point of view, and maybe don't, get down there in the dirt with them and take the higher ground, because we have these things for a reason. Try to put aside our differences and like I say in the song, like, I've been right more than I've been wrong. Like, admitting that you're actually capable of being fallible is not a bad thing. So trying to show some of that vulnerability. But when you put that in a song and you put it out there, it's leaving you pretty exposed as a human, because, there is a lot of me in these songs, and I have had my heart broken in more ways than one. And it's hard to put that, that sense of loss in a song and then have somebody, listen to it, and it's a part of me. So if I'm talking about my truth and hoping that you see some of yours in there and we don't connect, it's not just like, I didn't just write a happy song that you didn't tap your foot to.
Right. I've heard you describe yourself as a human wrecking ball at points in your life. What does that mean? Can we talk about that?
Well, I mean, I have been a sober person now for over 8 years. So I think I was literally a wrecking ball prior to getting sober, just in terms of the kind of damage that I would make in my own life and the lives of people around me. But I think too, just as an artist, I'm pretty self-centered. It's kind of one of the risks of the job, you kind of have to be. And so, sometimes I can just be completely clueless in terms of the impact that I have on other people, because it's pretty focused. Like, I don't think you can sit down for 12 hours in a row working on a single line on a song and not be pretty focused and self-absorbed. But at the same time, sometimes that makes me like not a good friend and not a good partner and that, a lot of these things. So there's a few articles out there about being, married to an artist and what it's like to date an artist. And honestly, all of them are true. I always make the biggest joke probably that I make about myself is I sure as hell wouldn't want to be married to me.
It takes incredible long suffering to be the partner, and in some cases, the bandmate of an artist.
Oh, all my bandmates would tell you, like, it's the best of times and the worst of times when you're on tour with me. The thing is, I tend to not. I tend to not focus it on other people now, which is better. Like, I've become a little bit more of a grown up that way. But still, like, I mean, it can be a roller coaster ride. But that's where the magic comes from, and that's the unfortunate part of the downside of being an artist is, all that magic. It also has a dark side to it, and you have to sort of accept the person as a whole. And I think a lot of people who are pure side people who are not songwriters that tour with songwriters, you just get used to them. You get to the point where it's like, well, she's just being like she always is a songwriter. They're moody.
It's, well, especially like, I don't know what it's like for you when you tour. Like, do you road manage yourself and all that stuff, or do you have people who do that?
For the most part, I tour manage myself, just because it's an added expense.
Yeah.
It's a luxury, and I'd rather have another bandmate than somebody driving me around. It's great when someone's there to take care of the merch and deal with the venue and all that stuff. But most of the time when I'm touring, the budget's just not there. So a lot of the times I am tour managing myself. But I have great bandmates, and so typically people pitch in. I mean, it's all for one and one for all, right?
Yeah, it is. You're like, it's kind of you against the world, especially if you're in Europe and you're far from home. But I mean, tour managing yourself adds a whole other layer of attention and stress. And it's like, I see it from the other side. I'm a side player, and yes, I pitch in as much as I can. But I see all the pressure.
Yeah.
I've written and talked a lot about this. It's like, you drive for 10 hours or 8 hours or 6 hours. For most people, at the end of that 6 hours, the job is done. For a touring band, the job hasn't started yet. You know what I mean? So there's this layer of tired and road grit and pressure and money and all that stuff. It's like the more you tour with people, the more you begin to appreciate how much stress they're under. You know, you learn to cut a lot of slack. I'm telling you as a side player, we understand.
Yeah. Well, because especially as the front person, you are on from the moment that you walk into that venue until you get back to the hotel. And if you're building, you're still on, you know, and it's, you know, anything like if there is bad weather and so you have a low turnout, like the amount of pressure that you're under as a front person, it's like, it's great when I have a great payday. But for the most part, you know, you're sitting there going like, oh God, I hope this, like if the last 2 shows on this tour tank, I'm going to lose money on this tour. I need these shows to deliver. So please, sun, come out. You know, please don't snow, don't rain, don't do whatever it is that they're forecasting for, because I really need these 2 shows to deliver. And then I still have to go out and I have to put on the best show that I've ever put on in my life, you know, and that it is really hard. Like it's very demanding. And I think you have to have a certain kind of drive that comes from a special kind of place. I always think of it in terms of like, you know, if you're a professional athlete, as a front person, you're the quarterback on the team because you have to have a memory of like a gnat. Basically, whatever just happened, I don't recall because I have to do this thing right here, right now, and just move forward because otherwise you're going to take the whole team down with you.
The other thing is that, particularly as a singer-songwriter who is the name on the product, everybody wants a piece of you, right?
Yes. Yes.
I'm the drummer. For the most part, people don't even know I was there on the stage. You know, I can go off stage and be fine. Everybody wants a piece of Lynne Hanson.
Everybody.
It's like, that is exhausting. I've watched it.
It is exhausting. And I think too, like just even everything that gets you to the point where you're on the tour, it's like there's so many demands on me as an artist. In terms of media support, in terms of all the different things that I need to take care of, and when a side person doesn't know something, or I'm the one who wrote the song, I have to bring them up to speed, or if they're having a hard time, I have to sit there and make them feel better, because you know they're like a key part of my team, and so I can't have a team member who isn't performing because you know their girlfriend dumped them back home. And like that kind of stuff has happened while I've been on tour, and I'm sitting there having to be counselor. Well, really, I probably need to see one.
Well, I've been the counselor too.
Yeah.
Sometimes the side player has to be the one who's there to pick up the pieces for the artist as well. It's part of the job description.
Well, and I think that's the great thing. Like when you have a band that's hitting on all cylinders, you know, that's what you are. You're like family on the road. And I think, you know, I still do some touring solo, but I even just like it when I have one other person with me, because you have that sense of camaraderie and you have that sense of us against them. And, you know, it really is probably like a saving grace for you when you are touring as much as I do, to have that companionship, not just musically, but as you say, like somebody that you can have as a sounding board. Like if something happens on the road, you'd be amazed at what people will say the things people will say to me. And I have to get in the tour van and just go like, did you hear that? Like, is that for real? And then all you want is like a reality check where the person goes, oh yeah, they're so full of like,
Oh yeah. It's nuts. Like, but there's something very, very special about the van. When the van is good, there's something very special about the van.
Well, I think it was Jenny Wiley who said to me, it's like being at camp. Like here we are, we're all grown-ups and we're still at camp, you know, and when it goes well, it's like, it's just the best summer in the entire world. And then when it doesn't go well, it's like, Mom and Dad, I want to come home.
Yeah, you have to be my good friend, Denny Gauthier. I don't know if you know Denny Gauthier.
I do, yeah, I do.
Denny says you have to be kind of an animal.
Yeah. Well, I think it really is a certain mentality. And I think there's a reason that, people sort of get into the arts and they don't stay in the arts because I think you have to have a certain mentality. And typically I think it is driven from this inner desire, this inner need to express yourself through art. And I think whether it's songs or whether it's visual or words as a literary person, whatever your art form is, like it comes from a special place and it's what keeps you moving forward. Because honestly, I think it's one of the more difficult jobs in the world that doesn't involve caring for another person.
Interesting. Yeah. And you are doing a book of poems as a companion to this record, right?
That's correct. Yeah. It's being illustrated at the moment as we speak. Some
great.
Illustrations. Yeah.
Oh, that's exciting. Will this be, have you published poems before or is this a new thing?
I put out a book of 2016 and they were haiku accompanied by photos. And that was my first attempt.
Yeah.
So this is my first book of actual like poetry. So it's got a section of poems, it's got a section of haiku, and then it's got the lyrics from the album because I've been told I'm a bit of a poet with my lyrics. So I'm not putting a lyric book out with the album just because it'll be on the vinyl, but not on the CD. So, I just felt like I wanted to get my words out there.
Yeah.
So this was the best way to do it. Good
for you. It's really, I'm so inspired and impressed by people who actually deliver on the art. It's encouraging to see. And people who listen to the show know my history with writing, but it's been a problem for me to have the confidence to do that sometimes, to believe in myself enough to actually produce the work. So kudos to you for doing that and putting it out.
Well, I do a lot of co-writing. And what's funny is, I've done a lot of co-writing with side musicians because they bring something special. They bring something that I don't bring to the table. And I think a lot of the times the thing that I hear the most is this is like, oh, I'm not really a songwriter. And yet you can help to finish a process.
Oh yeah.
But the other thing that is remarkable is like when I have sat down and written songs with a side person, the most common thing that I'll hear from them is, it's really hard to write a song. Like it's really hard to write a good song. And I think sometimes the audience, when they hear a finished song, especially if they relate to it, especially if it's something that they feel that they've known forever, it's like, oh, it comes from nowhere. And it's like, oh, songwriting isn't that hard until you sit down and you try to do it and you realize, man, this is harder than it looks. I can't play drums to save my life. My feet and my hands don't move together. And so when I see a drummer, I'm like, that's magic. And I think that sometimes people, it's not until you actually sit down and try to write a song that you realize, oh my goodness, it takes as much skill and knowledge of the craft plus talent to be able to write a good song.
Do you think songwriting is like a muscle? Like, do you think because I've interviewed lots and lots of people and some prolific songwriters, and some of them have said, I asked them, how are you so prolific? And they say, well, I've been doing this for 30 years. You get better at it.
Well, I probably have what I hope is not a contentious perspective on songwriting. I really think you're born a writer. And just like you're born with a great voice and you're born with the ability to be a great an instrumentalist. And then you have to practice. You have to hone your craft. But you are given a natural talent at it because it's why no matter how many, classes that you take on creative writing and stuff, not everybody will write a book because not everybody has been gifted that skill and that talent. But absolutely, to be prolific, you have to sit down and do the work. So the idea that I just said, like I wrote this record in 6 weeks, but every single day at 9:00 in the morning, I was sitting down writing for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And whether something came to me or not. And that's the deal that I have with my, my creative force is that, I need 11 more songs because I have a couple and I want to have this many so I can pick and choose. So I promise I'll sit here for the next 6 weeks and try to write this album. And it happens because I've been doing it for a long time. But also I worked a long time to get to the point where I know how to prime the pump if I get stuck. But at the end of the day, you do have to do the work.
That is being a pro.
Yeah. And I mean, you have to write when you don't want to.
Mm-hmm. This comes up on my show over and over and over because I interview a lot of creative people, and over and over and over, it's not glamorous. You have to do the work.
You do. And I think too, the thing that, again, it's a difficult thing to say to some people sometimes, but it's like, you also have to have an ability. Right. Because it's not easy to write. Like, I can't write a pop song to save my life. It's just not a genre that I'm any good at. If I had to sit down and try to write a pop song, I would be very challenged at it just because it's not in my wheelhouse. But I could certainly contribute lyrics to a pop song that might make it a little less poppy, right, while still letting it be what it is. Right. Because lyrically, that certainly is my skill set. My wheelhouse is to write kind of bluesy type, Americana type songs. That's where my leaning is. But ultimately, I could write in any genre if I'm working with someone else.
Have you embraced that, or have you at times resisted that and thought, no, I need to write something more X or more Y? Like, is this something you've just always embraced?
Well, I think I love the writing process so much that I would never exclude any opportunity to write something, just because if it's not something that I am an expert at, it's actually more fun because it's new. So, like, I don't write new country songs, but I would absolutely love to write a new country song with somebody, just because I think it would be a lot of fun. I'd love to do a rap song, do a hip hop tune. I don't know the intricacies of the beats. I think there's a lot of the musical background that I don't know, but I'm pretty good with words. And so if I could approach it from the perspective of what's the topic that we want to write to, and it's a spoken word kind of thing, I think I'd actually be pretty good at it because I'm good at words.
We bring our own flavor to everything, right?
Exactly.
Right. That's interesting. That's cool. Because I've talked to other people, and maybe there's pressure sometimes. It's like, I'm really good at this one thing, but I feel like, I have to do this other thing because that's where the money is, or that's whatever. It's like, it takes a certain amount of maturity to resist that and actually embrace sometimes what really comes naturally to you. You know what I mean?
Well, I think if you try to be something you're not, that's when you can hear it doesn't quite work, right? Like, you have to be, as an artist, you have to be credible. Your characters have to be credible in the song. And so if I'm trying to be something that I am not, I will not be credible, and the listener will know. The listener will be like, hey, that's not you. Like, but again, I think if you do want to get into something that's outside, work with somebody who is an expert in that area, who is very good in that area. And if you can do that kind of collaboration, I mean, I can't name one off the top of my head, but I know there have been, really great collaborations where, people from different genres have merged and melded. And it works because you have two people who are really good at what they do. Yeah. And you just stick them together and see what happens. It's
cool. I think you can learn a lot in a hurry doing that.
You really can. Yeah.
That's great. Challenging, but fun.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think you have to put aside your notions, you have to put aside any kind of expectation and hard line that you might take in terms of what is and what isn't art. Right. You have to be very, very open to trying something new.
Yeah.
And again, it comes down to a human thing, like what are you as a human? Are you open to change? Are you open to doing something different and taking a risk? And if it's not in your wheelhouse, there's nothing wrong with that.
No, but you can also bring something back to your wheelhouse from that.
Well, I mean, I like to think of that. I love blues music. I'm not a blues musician, but I love blues. Yeah. And I have a couple of tracks on the new record that are very, very bluesy. And, I love it. And so it's like, I'm going to do it. I think it's not so far outside of what I do. There's a few little threads there that tie me back. And I think that there's couple of the better songs on the record, just in terms of the musicality of them. Because it's a different form for me.
Well, sometimes there's energy in a different form, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's exciting because it's new.
Right, exactly. And that you feel that in the music. It comes through. That energy translates, It's not tangible really, but you feel it for sure.
Exactly. And then the audience gets to tap into that. And I think ultimately that's what it comes down to, right? Is that you're trying to give something to the audience that's exciting. And they don't know necessarily the backstory behind how it came to be. But, I think they can taste that excitement because it is something that is, stretching your limits.
Yeah, absolutely. So I won't keep you much longer, but speaking of characters, our mutual friend, Alexandra Liebert.
Yes.
From Germany, who recommended you for my podcast. And thank you, Lexi, for that. I asked her what she wanted me to ask you. And there's a few things. And she wanted to know about your murder ballads as a starting point, which are full of characters. Murder ballads.
I haven't written a murder ballad in a while. I think I might be getting close to being in a murderous rage these days. So who knows? But the murder ballad thing for me is always a lot of the writing that I do. I can see the movie. I see the movie in front of me, and for the murder ballads, it's like a murder mystery.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the times, a character will kind of just come into my head, and I start to picture their backstory and how did they get to be where they are. And a lot of the times, I'll read about something that's intriguing, and it's like, oh, really? And that just, it puts that character in my head, and I start to see the movie, and then I can't help myself. I have to write the story.
Yeah.
Because again, I think I am a writer. I'm a writer first, a musician second. And so that stuff just fascinates the heck out of me.
Yeah. So the Murder Ballads was like a 7-song, technically an EP. Would we call it an EP?
Yeah.
And each song is about a murder.
Yeah.
Did you come up with all of those murders, or were they inspired by something else or something that really happened?
Some of them were inspired by something that happened, but I never told the story that I was reading, if that makes sense. So I might read about a person, like I can think of one in particular, like for Cecil Hotel, like I was reading about the Cecil Hotel, and the story that I tell in that song isn't there's no real story that happened like that. But what occurred to me at that moment in time when I got my first spark in terms of what I was going to write about, it was like, what would you have to do that you'd have to live there?
Right.
And then because I could picture the type of lifestyle that you would have, the character he literally just walked into my imagination, and I wrote this song very quickly.
Yeah.
It was written basically the lyrics in one day and the music in the second. So it's written in 2 days. 2 days, and 2 days is fast.
Yeah. Well, it's weird. It's like I've written some songs, but it's like a song either comes out in 15 minutes or it takes 6 months.
Yeah.
One of the two.
Yeah.
So murder ballads, for the next Halloween party you have, there they are.
That's right.
It's in a weird way, a really fun record.
That's what a lot of people say. And it always makes me laugh because it was only supposed to be a joke, and then it kind of got legs of its own, and people really liked it, and so it became like a real thing. But at the time, it was kind of like an inside joke.
I'm glad you put that record out, and hopefully there'll be a Murder Ballads 2 at some point in time. 7 Deadly Spins was the name of the album, which, as you said in an interview, when you've got a title like that, you've got to do something with it.
You have to do something, yeah. It's
great. So Alexandra also wanted to know about you climbing up on stools during your encores.
So in 2014 in the summer, I blew my knee out. I completely totaled it. I had like what the surgeon called as a catastrophic knee injury. I tore basically everything. I had broken bones and stuff. So I had all these surgeries, and then I was on tour in 2016 over in Europe. And for some reason, I got it in my head. It was an open air show. And I decided I was going to climb up onto this table. And I had to climb up onto a chair and onto the table to do this for my encore. And I was going to do it unplugged. So my bandmates are like looking at me going like, you're out of your mind. Like you just blew out your knee. Like you're still limping and everything else. And you're going to get up. So I got up there. And then when I looked down, every single person in the audience had their phone out and was videotaping me.
Of course they were.
So it was like kind of a startling thing. And then so anyways, I thought, and then I jumped down, and they were, people were trying to catch me and stuff. And it was quite the production. So then I thought, maybe I'll do it again. So I did it again. And it started becoming this thing where like, people now expect me, like I will play house concerts and they'll be like, okay, well, we have a table that you can climb onto if you want, and stand on, if you want at some point in the show. And so now it's kind of like become what I've been known for, is to climb on furniture. And I mean, I have climbed on like bars and like big, huge speakers and like I've climbed onto all kinds of things.
So the original impetus was just to prove that you could, or it was just a weird thought?
It was just like this spontaneous thing. It was like, there's something and I'm going to climb onto it. And I think probably had something to do with the fact that, just to prove that I could as well to myself or something. But it was really an impulsive thing. Like, I mean, I'm an impulsive person. So I will do things, like we were touring in Europe last year, and we decided it would be really fun to do a little video from atop the tour van because it was parked next to a fence. And so we all climbed up on top of the tour van and took our band shot from up there. And like, if you think about it, it's probably not a good thing to be crawling on the top of the tour van, but it just seemed like a good idea at the time.
Was this like a Sprinter van?
Yeah.
Those are tall. Yeah. They can be tall. All right.
I know.
Go on.
I know. But so I think that's like, I'm a physical person. So, I mean, I like to do things that are physically challenging. And I think that now I just kind of feel like I have to do it every show because people are disappointed when I don't.
It's your trademark. I have one fun and kind of horrifying climbing up on things story, if you'll indulge me. So I used to be in a rock band called Hiroshima Hearts, and we played several times with this band from Australia called the Lazies. Okay. Like they're exactly what you expect in an Australian rock band. Okay. And we played this venue in London, and the guitar player, Matt, when he does a solo, would always get up on the bar. That was his thing. So he'd walk to the back of the room and get up on the bar, and everybody went crazy with their phones and stuff. So Matt's up on the bar and he's playing a solo. He's got big long hair. And he's wailing his hair around like rock players do. And there were some low-hanging lights above the bar, right? And he smashed his face on one of the low-hanging lights, right? And he didn't even blink, kept playing. And the next thing I know, the bartender is handing him up a towel. His nose was cut wide open, right? So he's got like the thing on his face and he's still playing his guitar solo. And he finished the show and then went off to the hospital for a bunch of stitches on this thing. So please be careful about swinging your hair around when you climb up on the bar in your encore, okay?
I'm usually pretty careful, like in terms of like, oh man, but I've come close to like backing off of whatever it is that I'm standing on, because that's usually the big risk, is that you're going to actually back off of it. It's not stepping forward, it's usually backing up.
I've had that too on drum risers and small stages. It's like I've got half an inch to spare behind me. One false move and I'm off the end.
Exactly.
That's not okay.
No.
So Alexander had a follow-up question to the climbing on things, which is, are you afraid of heights?
I have vertigo. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. So I feel like I'm going to fall all the time when I'm up anything from like about a story or higher, like one story or higher. I feel like I'm going to fall, but I do it anyways. Like I go hiking and I went zip lining in the summer. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah. And my heart was racing. I was like, the first zip line, I was like holding onto that pole for my dear life. But I just feel like it's not real. Like I'm not going to fall.
Right.
And I don't want to limit myself to experiences because of something that isn't real. Like it's a fear that isn't real. And I kind of approach my whole life like that. It's like things that I fear and limits that I think about, just don't think about them because they are, unless it's in front of you, it doesn't really exist. And so I've kind of overcome what is really like an inner ear problem by just kind of like, at the worst points, close your eyes and keep moving forward.
Wow. Good for you. And I think that probably applies to a lot of things in life, right?
It does. It really does.
Yeah. All right. Lynne Hanson, you are a delight. Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thank you, John. It's been a real pleasure to chat with you.
Good. Yes, I agree. And good luck with the record and the book of poems and all the fun stuff. And hopefully we will see you in London soon.
Oh, I hope so. I hope so. I like your town. So.
Well, we like you too. You froze on me again. Where'd you go? There you are. I'm going to let you go. Thanks again so much.
Thank you, John.
And I will talk to you soon, I hope.
Okie doke. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you once again, gentle listener, for taking in today's show. And thank you to Lynne for being such an inspiring guest. If you want to know more about Lynne and the rest of my guests, go to www.john-huff.com. That's JOHN-HUFF.com. You can also find the show on Facebook at The John Huff Podcast. If you're an Instagram person, you can find me at JW_Huff. If you're an Apple Podcast person, please do me a big favor and leave a rating and review of the show, preferably a positive one. That's all the time we have for right now, but I'll be back very soon. Until then, keep your wits about you and remember, good things happen when you put yourself out there. Bye for now. Did Arsenal actually win a football match?